Good morning. This is Magistrate Boykins. We are on the record in 2019 DR 339 Stetzer and Stetzer. Can I have the appearance of the parties? If you could state your name, spell your last name for the record.
Thomas Stetzer.
My name is Sherilyn Stetzer, Stetzer.
Thank you. Mr. Stetzer?
Thomas Stetzer, Stetzer.
Thank you. So we are here on a motion for parenting time dispute and to enforce. Is that still what it is that we're doing today?
For 3 years now, yes.
All right. So, Mr. Stetzer, because the motions are yours, you have an opportunity to speak first. The hearing is good. Each party is going to have about 20 minutes in order to make their case, and then the court will issue a ruling. Is there any questions before we get started?
Do we get sworn in?
Yeah, is there any questions before, besides do you get sworn in?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Stetzer, if you would raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony that you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I swear and affirm.
Thank you. You may begin.
I really don't know where to start. It's been 3 years. All I've been doing is done everything the court has requested. The court has been in my favor numerous times. They have failed to enforce their own orders. Sherry's been sanctioned for 1.5 years, but the court's not a collection agency, so it means nothing. I don't know where to go. This is where I'm at. I have nowhere else to. All my visiting rights. I'm not even able to set up visiting right now because I'm in her. So I have no ability to set up business with this.
Thank you. Ms. Stetzer, do you have any questions regarding the testimony that you've just heard from Mr. Stetzer?
It was coming through pretty choppy. I didn't hear it, but I know the basis of his complaint is that I'm not giving him the same rights as a loving father. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Stetzer isn't a loving father. He's a rapist and an abuser. My child is disabled because of him. We have extensive trauma and need a bunch of therapy and have been making much progress.
Ms. Stetzer, the question was, do you have any questions for Mr. Stetzer?
How are you able to actually provide for this child that you're barely paying $30 a month in child support for?
I'm sorry. I work 6 days a week. I'm actually on the job site right now because of the Princeton's behind me at the mountain. I work 6 days a week. I've been in the same department for over 2 years. I have money to provide for my.
On what construction site is someone allowed to hang out on their phone in a court hearing? In construction jobs, you either work all day or you do not. There is not I'm going to take an hour-long break and go do this. You're just not assigned to day labor that day.
Okay, so Ms. Stetzer, that has nothing to do with what he's testified to. And you're here because you haven't followed what the court has ordered. So you can ask him questions surrounding that, but all the rest of that, what job and all that allows you to do certain things, has nothing to do with whether or not you're following the orders of the court.
The issue.
I can bring. Go ahead.
The issue is that Mr. Stetzer is lying about the life he claims to have in order to gain the court's support for his rights. I'm keeping my son safe from a serial rapist. I need to prove that this man is not who he says he is. The court needs to understand the dangers that are inherent in letting a serial rapist anywhere near a disabled little child who was traumatized for 5 years by this man.
So again, what we're here is to determine whether or not you're following the orders that the court has given you. That's what we're here for.
Yeah. And Your Honor, if I may interject, she's for 3 years. I fear this is information that she's given to his therapist and his schools, as I have requested to meet with the therapist so we could have a one-on-one meeting so they could actually get to know him. However, that's been denied because of information they've been given. So this is all from him. I have my hands tied behind my back, and this is all enforced for years. The claims and accusations, it's the same thing over and over. Nothing's ever been done. And I just want to see my son.
All right.
That's all I've ever done. Everything the court has... Okay, go ahead.
Ms. Stetzer, do you have any other questions?
No, I don't.
Okay. Then this is your opportunity to explain to the court why it is that you're not following the orders.
All right, it's as I've been telling the court since January of 2019 that this was not a family situation. This was human trafficking across state lines from Wisconsin to Colorado by a serial predator who's been targeting disabled women since 1979 when my mother graduated high school. He raped me 400 plus times at knife point every night for 14 months to create my child and continue raping me throughout the entire pregnancy until my son was 2 months old. My son has experienced extensive, unspeakable trauma, and yes, we're in therapy so that we need to be safe from this serial predator. That's the only way about it. This is a man who has attempted to kidnap my child from his preschool by trying to convince them to give my son to him after school and do visits at the school that they're not licensed for. I have 2 visitation firms. I don't remember, one of them is named ThriveWorks, but I don't remember the name of the other one because it was 3 years ago. But I have 2 visitation places who are familiar with our case, saw the dangers inherent in allowing a serial predator who abused and beat the snot out of my son for 4 years to have any place anywhere near him. And for the Colorado courts to be enforcing the parental rights of a serial rapist is a very dangerous precedent to set. It allows disabled women to be used as breeding stock to provide the domestic supply of infants that is being demanded by the Roe v. Wade being reversed. It's a very dangerous time to be a disabled woman who's capable of having children, because those children can be given back to the rapist cattle ranchers, as it were. I need to keep my son safe from this psycho who's been attacking disabled women for 43 years. This isn't a loving daddy. This is the guy who beat my son many times every day. This is the man who held knives to my throat to rape me to produce the child. This is the man who almost killed me for attempting to take birth control to not have a child grow up in this hell. We escaped fair and square from human trafficking in January of 2019, and the court has done everything possible since then to ascertain the rights of the slave owner. I don't know what century anyone thinks they're standing in, but this is completely unacceptable. And as it is, with Mr. Stetzer bragging in court about stalking us all over the place and attempting to leave state, take my kid, and, disappear. He's going to kill my child if he's allowed anywhere near him. I can't allow that to happen. It is my duty as my son's only loving parent, not a predator, to protect him from the predator. Otherwise, disabled women all over the country will have this case precedent to look at as their children are ripped out of their arms and given back to the predators who raped them. It's my duty to keep my baby safe. And he's made extensive progress in the 3 years since we escaped slavery to Mr. Thomas Stetzer. We're no longer having to sell weapons for him. We're no longer having to sell grams of marijuana to the homeless for him. We're no longer required to buy food stamps from the homeless for him. I submitted evidence, his very own ledger book, detailing his criminal activity to exploit the homeless and traffic us to do it. After Operation Freedom in January 2019, when we were no longer Mr. Stetzer's property, that market shut down. His punters who were coming to my apartment, I sent them packing. Shops closed, master's gone. He lives at the Denver Rescue Mission now. As it is, after we escaped, he continued taking slaves at an alarmingly fast pace. He brought 8 or 9 of them to court in 2019. That's on court recordings, the cameras. Y'all have that. 2 of those slaves died under mysterious circumstances. One of them in February of 2020, right before COVID hit. We had a court hearing with Jennifer Torrington in which Mr. Stetzer accused me of not contacting visitation places, and I proved that I was in fact the only one who had contacted them. Mr. Stetzer blamed his inaction on me, saying that, I'm not going to do it and waste my time if she's not going to do it. Well, I did it. I contacted them. And so that was proven. So Mr. Stetzer and Judge Torrington, kind of left with foot and mouth. And 2 days later, the slave that Mr. Stetzer had died. And another one died shortly previous to that. Mr. Stetzer is no longer allowed on the block, as it were, near the Denver Rescue Mission St. Francis area, because the community is aware of his activities and they're not willing to buy from him anymore. I don't know how else to explain this. I have piles and piles and gigabytes of evidence that this man is extremely dangerous. I've got school assessments stating the developmental damage that this rapist did to my baby while we were owned by him. Aaron is on SSI and has been since November of 2020 because of what he endured at the hands of Mr. Stetzer. My son is severely developmentally delayed and has emotional issues, communication issues, even incontinence issues, because when he was little and attempting to use the bathroom, Mr. Stetzer would beat the hell out of him because he wanted to keep him in diapers, to keep the expenses up, to keep me more dependent on him for the tiny little crumbs of survival that he allowed us to have. My son wasn't allowed to eat while we were Mr. Stetzer's property. He sustained my child with protein shakes, those Premier Proteins at Sam's Club, and refills of milk. My son stopped growing for 2 years, which can be confirmed by his doctor. And, he was sick all the time. My little guy was dying at the hands of Mr. Stetzer. He was not verbal at the time because he wasn't allowed to be verbal. When he attempted to speak and use words and communicate like a happy, inquisitive little boy, he was severely beaten by Mr. Stetzer. He didn't start speaking until after Operation Freedom. Now, of course, he's a fluent talker and a brilliant mind. He comes up with the most incredible ideas and the most incredible designs. He's a brilliant builder and an engineer with his toys. My kid is growing up to be the sweetest little heart and an absolute little genius. And that's because of the 3.5 years that we have been safe from Mr. Stetzer and his abuse and his crime racket down by the rescue mission. I've submitted endless evidence of the hell we went through and the progress we've made since the escape. I started a business. I'm Hippie Eclectic Hope Jewelry and Fractals. I'm doing better each and every day. My son's doing better each and every day. We have a future. That future does not include Rapey McRapeface. That future does not include the man who used to beat the hell out of my son and hold a knife to my throat to make me obey his every command. We don't need that man in our lives. And the court justifying his rights over my son purely because he's an able-bodied white man is preposterous. I'm not even attracted to men. My child will get to have 2 moms growing up. And he'll be fine and happy and healthy and loved. But in the meantime, I'm afraid to bring anyone into this family when Mr. Stetzer is allowed to brag in court about stalking our activities in violation of the restraining order, defend himself by saying that it's in the public domain. Walmart's in the public domain too. He can't stalk me there either. And, put my child's life and mine in danger, trying to kidnap him from his school, having Dominic Armstrong, the grandson of Bruce Randolph, spying on us and doing reconnaissance at 40th in Colorado, where we used to live. We moved to Welton Park to save our lives, not only from Mr. Stetzer and his paid stalkers, but from the Homeless Coalition, who I also have a ton of evidence of their organized crime racket targeting disabled women. Disabled men too, so, people with disabilities, my bad. But they have enforced human trafficking in their buildings for decades. There are many of us who've been owned, who've had our homes taken over by predators and drug dealers and criminals, people with weapons and meth addictions. My case is not unique. So it is even more important that I use my fortitude and intelligence and recognizance abilities to take care of my child and keep him safe from this predator and show the legal system that rapists do not equal daddies. This isn't a loving man who wants to see his little boy. This is a serial wackadoo who wants to kill us both. I can't accept that. I can't allow that. He had people in the bushes waiting for us at the first visitation place. He jumped out into traffic to try and stop my car and take my son out of it. This is a dangerous, deranged human being who did extensive, unspeakable damage to myself and my child, trafficking me across state lines, luring me under false pretenses in order to create this baby. So I can't allow disabled women to be used as breeding stock to produce the domestic supply of infants that the Supreme Court is demanding by dropping Roe v. Wade. I can't accept that. I can't allow those cases to determine what happens to disabled women and their children. I cannot allow the Denver courts to set the precedent of legalized slave rape and using disabled women as breeding cattle. There is absolutely nothing okay with that. I cannot be okay with that because countless lives are at stake with that. I don't know how many other kids this dude has done this to. What I do know is that he's a convicted sex offender. In the 1990s, he molested a little girl who was my age. This is not a loving, hardworking daddy. This is a predator, a murderer, a slave owner, a dangerous human being. He shouldn't be allowed near children, let alone allowed to raise them, see them, have daddy rights over them. I have to keep my baby safe because I'm the only one who can. I'm the only other parent. It's all I can do to keep my son safe from this serial rapist who trafficked me 17 hours away from my home in order to forcibly create this baby. I have to protect this baby. And he's doing so much better since we escaped. Every day there's improvement. There are people in the community around Denver and all over the internet. I mean, we have a support system. My child is not alone in this world anymore, being beaten relentlessly by that man. He's allowed to have a childhood. He's allowed to grow and develop and learn and make friends and, have what's called a life. If we were still Mr. Stetzer's property, we would not have survived through COVID. He would have killed us a long time ago and then continued to traffic my son for his SSI and me for my business from beyond the grave. And the court just can't wait to allow it.
Ms. Stetzer, you got one more minute.
That's all I've got to say, that I need to keep this baby safe from this man, and all the evidence that I've submitted has been ignored by the court. I've even got my former lawyer admitting to skipping out on court, having a hearing delayed by faking sick and not looking at my evidence because she's aware of the dangers of the corruption in the system, but yet the dangers and the corruption in the system allow her job security. Even the advocates from a light human trafficking advocacy group are throwing disabled women and their babies under the bus to sustain their own status. I've got that documented, proven that this is what's going on. I have to stop that. I can't be okay with that. Our lives are literally in the balance. That's all I've got to say.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Stetzer, do you have any questions for Ms. Stetzer?
Yeah, just one. Have you applied at the Carla Center?
Applied at what?
The Carla Center.
Carla Center. I've turned in a bunch of paperwork for them. I've also turned in a bunch of paperwork for ThriveWorks, who says you're a dangerous human being, and the only reason my son wants to be anywhere near you is because the system is threatening me with death by incarceration if he doesn't obey and go to see you. The only thing that can convince him anywhere near you is that I'll be killed by you if he doesn't. That's no reason to go see your daddy.
Ms. Stetzer, you've answered the question. Mr. Stetzer, do you have any other questions?
No.
All right. Thank you. All right, so we are here on a motion to enforce the contempt as well as we are here on a parenting time dispute. So the issue seems to be whether or not you, Ms. Stetzer, are going to follow the orders of the court. And I have heard what you said. Doesn't change what the orders of the court are. So there's options obviously that you have, and there's options that the court has, and you testify that you don't want the Mr. Stetzer to have your child, well, that's where you're headed. You're not trying to follow anything that the court has ordered, and at some point, that's going to be the only option that the court has left. So what the court is going to order here, yet again, is that parenting time at a facility be set up. So this time, I'm going to order that you, Mr. Stetzer, set it up. So you have 30 days in order to find a facility that will do. Okay, you don't need to tell me what it is. What you need to do is set it up. So you go and determine whether or not the Carla Center is going to do what it is that needs to be done as far as therapeutic sessions, and you register with them. Once you're registered, you let her know, you let Ms. Stetzer know whether or not they've agreed to take the case, and then she can register there.
I will put that done before I've been in contact with redo application again for the fourth time. But I tagged that, they sent her an email. She refuses to do the application, and we're right back at this point. This has been doing for 3 years.
Well,
This has been continuing for 3 years. Action needs to be taken, not the same order. That's the same order for 3 years, Your Honor.
Okay, so Mr. Stetzer, what is it that you would like the court to do?
I don't know what it's going to take. This order has been applied countless times in my favor and has not been complied with. And she has been in contempt of court over the order in time. But yet the same order keeps getting put in place, and yet it doesn't get followed. We must in this exact same situation, and then gets reordered. I don't know what the court has to do. But it isn't that. That's not the. That's not what I'm seeking. I want to see my son.
Okay.
Guaranteed.
And so I get that. However, what I can do is order these things, and you have no other solution either, other than whatever the court says. So then I tell you what the court says, and then you complain about what the court says. So if you don't have any other solution,
I've reapplied. I've applied at the Carla Center 4 times. You have to. You're saying I've reapplied over and over because it keeps fired because she does nothing. The other courtroom 11 pulled her contempt. She repaid the costs that I am Carla Center. The problem is she never supplied visits there, so there were no costs incurred. So she was penalized 0. That's the penalty he receives, 0. This same thing, it's just another. Oh, I guess I'll just take the order. I'll do whatever I have to. I'll contact the Carla Center. It'll be the same situation.
so if they already have your information in there in the system and it's still active, then.
And I have to reapply.
Okay.
I have to
So
reapply.
can you let me finish, or are you going to continue to talk over me?
I'll mute.
If your information is active, then you can send the information to her. If it's not active, then yes, while I don't have any control over the Carla Center or any place else, all I can do is tell you what it is that needs to happen, and that is if your information is not active, then yes, you need to reapply and then send the information to her so she can set up a schedule with them to bring the child and complete the information as far as an intake goes.
Hello?
You that
Oh,
you inform the other party as to what that is. So we have a status conference on this that is scheduled for July 25th at 9:30. So it's going to be on WebEx, and that's going to be to determine whether or not registration at the Carla Center or some other center has occurred. You, Ms. Stetzer, we can't keep going on this way because it's not healthy for anybody. So,
exactly. My son and I need to be freed from this dangerous predator. We don't need him hanging over our
I get what
heads,
you're
endangering our
saying, but that
lives.
doesn't change the order of the court. So I need you to follow that because, again, I'm not going to let this continue. So either you're going to follow what the orders are, or there's going to be consequences. And exactly what it is you don't want to have happen is what you're leading towards. So I'm just giving you the heads up, is that the court is expecting certain things from you, and that's what we want you to do. Otherwise, there's other consequences that you will face. So that's where we are.
The court is refusing to accept all facts and evidence in this case. Evidence, witnesses, piles of information have been disregarded to favor the rights of a serial rapist.
Okay, that's what your opinion is, and you're
Those
allowed
are
an
the
opinion.
facts, and I have
That's what
evidence
it
to
is
support
that
those
we are
facts.
doing. We are coming back on the 25th by WebEx in order to determine whether or not registration at the Carla Center or something else, someplace else, has occurred. And if it hasn't, then again, there'll be consequences. So we are now, that's where we are. So
July 25th, when?
9:30.
Right on, thank you.
Yes. All right, we are in recess. Thank you.
Okay. That works.